Alrighty, guys, let's talk about episode number 5 of season 2 of The Last of Us. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion, so if you have not seen the episode, no worries, just make sure to save this segment, save the podcast, and save the whatever platform you're watching it on. Just save it for later, or if you're watching the whole podcast, just make sure to skip around and come back once you have. Again, this is going to be full spoilers, so just so you are warned. Let's dive into The Last of Us, season 2, episode number 5. So, just to reiterate, I've been enjoying the season thus far, and obviously it's been a roller coaster, right? The first episode was really melancholy, really sad. You know, Joel dealing with the ramifications of what he did at the end of season 1, and there's sort of a falling out with Ellie as well. And then season 2 is the big episode. I mean, it's going to be hard to get over that episode. It was unbelievable. It was crazy, emotional, gut punch. Season 2 where Joel dies. So then we're starting to track, right? Because I think there's only 7 episodes in season 2 of The Last of Us because, and this is going to be relevant to something, or to later discussion points in this spoiler discussion, but, you know, because they've made the decision to split part 2, the game part 2, into 2 different seasons, we only have 7 episodes here, where I think the first season was a little bit longer. So this is only going to be 7 episodes, which means there's only going to be 2 more episodes in this season. And so, just kind of tracking the progression, right? Episode 2 kind of felt like this massive crescendo, which is amazing to have, so early in the season. But then we kind of wonder, or I was kind of wondering, what are the next 2 episodes going to be? And so episode 3, I was pleasantly surprised to find that it was really, I think episode 3 was a transition episode, and I think that they did a really good job of it in the transition episode of shifting focus away from Ellie, right, or away from Joel and onto Ellie, and saying, okay, so now what happens? And Ellie has this conflict in her, or this resolve to want to get revenge against Abby, right? That's the direction that the show is going. And so I was like, okay, she's heading to Seattle. Let's see what happens there. And then episode 4 happens, and episode 4 felt like it was just going in circles. They end up in Seattle. They try to do a couple things, and they kind of end up where they started. I get it. There's some great character moments in there as well. I think that the stuff with Dina being pregnant, I've had a week to think about this, and it felt sudden in the moment. I know that there were hints before that I just didn't catch, but it felt sudden in the moment. But I think that it's an interesting character. I don't want to say trait, but part of her character arc to have in this season, where she's also carrying a child with her throughout these horrifying and terrifying adventures that they're going on. And so I think that's something that carries on into this episode as well, when they have that conversation later where Ellie's like, oh my gosh, you gotta back out of this, we gotta go. So I think that's interesting. But again, I just think, sure, the burgeoning romance between Ellie and Dina, that's great and all. But I feel like in terms of forward momentum, it just didn't feel like the episode was going anywhere in particular. And so I was disappointed by that, because I was looking forward to, okay, how are we going to continue to push forward into the Abby Ellie storyline? We push forward a little bit more in this episode. If you watch my immediate reaction, you'll know I enjoyed this episode. I thought this was a solid return to form for The Last of Us. And by return to form, the bar has been set so high for this show. Return to form means it's probably, compared to most other shows, episodes of television for other shows, it's an excellent, tongue twisters, excellent episode of television. It really is. So, just for The Last of Us, though, it felt like, okay, we're kind of back to fundamentals, back to the roots here. And there are some things here and there we'll talk about in my in-depth discussion that I still kind of feel like, are we going in circles? What's going on? We'll get to that momentarily. So let's dive in here and kind of do a mini play-by-play of this episode. So we start out here with this flashback scene in the hospital. It seems like we're in Seattle still, and we get this revelation now that the virus is airborne, or can be airborne. The spores are in the air, which feels like it should have been a plot point that was introduced much earlier, because this feels like a true inciting incident for the show. Like, what would make this season different? Well, obviously it can be, just the revenge quest for Ellie to go after Abby, and that's obviously a big driving point of this season. But on the surface, if it's just Ellie goes after Abby, it's a very singular, linear storyline, and you need subplots, right? And subplots, so far have been WLF and the scars and the war between them. But even that hasn't been super interesting to me as of yet, just because I don't think they've been, they haven't wanted to reveal a lot of those secrets and subplots and things like that as of, just what's going on, the mechanics behind it and all that kind of stuff. I think they started to with Isaac, but they, it really hasn't revealed itself in full force just yet. I think a subplot about the virus suddenly becoming airborne is super interesting and feels like something that they should have introduced much earlier in the season, to be honest. But I still think it's a very interesting concept to introduce in the show. We cut back to present day, and I was, again, a little bit worried that this was going to be another Ellie and Dina kind of meander around for a little bit. Nothing really happens. I say that facetiously. I know things happened in episode 4. And I didn't dislike episode 4. I was just a little bit surprised that, okay, we're kind of halfway through this season. Where are we going to start to pick up? And that's really where more of my disappointment came from. But, at the beginning of this episode, it kind of felt similar. I mean, there was a lot of Ellie playing the guitar in this season. And I think we're going to see some more flashbacks to that with her and Joel in next episode, which I'm looking forward to. But, she starts to play the guitar again. And I was like, okay, I really liked the scene in last episode. But I just was a little worried. But then they very quickly start to get going and start to move forward. So then they go on here and they start walking throughout Seattle, and they see the dead bodies, and they see this graffiti on the wall of the Prophet. And it's a question, right, of who is the Prophet, because as far as I know, she hasn't been revealed yet, and I'm kind of curious. We haven't seen Abby in quite a while. Wild theory, is it related to Abby? Is she Abby? I doubt it, because it's, they seem in very strict opposition to one another, the WLF and the Scars. So I don't know who this Prophet lady is, but I'm sure that she's going to be a very prominent plot point later on, and I'm very curious to see where that goes. But then, like I said, we have that conversation that I was alluding to earlier between Dina and Ellie, where Dina reveals just a tragic backstory with her, and how her parents died, and about the first time she killed somebody. And it's hard, because what Dina says is horrific, and it's terrifying, and it hurts, but she's also egging Ellie on into this cycle of revenge and this cycle of violence. And you just don't want that, because Dina's like, I would take revenge too. And, Dina says, because Dina says this to Ellie, she's like, look, I know if I die, it's on me. And it's one thing to say that, and it's even another thing to believe that, but Ellie, and I mean that from Dina's perspective, it's one thing for Dina to say that. But, from Ellie's perspective, this is another added layer, another added burden on her of now. I mean, Dina can say that it's her death is on herself, but that's not true, right? Ellie would feel horribly responsible if Dina dies, and unfortunately, I feel like that's coming up in this season just based on how things are going. And not only that, but now that this is where the pregnancy comes in, I think on top of that, the fact that she's carrying a child is another added layer on top of all this. So I'm very scared for them. I think Ellie as a character is too. So they head into Seattle, and they're going through this big building in the middle. And I thought this was going to be the basement level. I thought they were going to find the basement level in that section. It turns out Ellie finds the basement with the spores a little bit later, but it was really tense. I mean, the fact that they're encountering all of these infected, the smarter infected, and the way that they shoot it, the way that the camera work kind of flickers onto them, and you kind of see them in the shadows and then in the flashlights, it's really tense, and I love that. I think this should have been, I had the realization during this moment that I feel like this episode and last episode should have been combined, because I feel like that this episode has the meat and the last episode has the emotional weight that the writers wanted the characters to have. And I feel like if you combine the two episodes, it would have been a really solid hour and a half long episode of television. I digress. This is the episode we got, but it's really great. And it's really tense, right? The way that they're going through the building and whatnot. Also a quick profession of love from Dina to Ellie and vice versa, right before they go into a death trap, which is always fun. And yeah, I mean, out of all the episodes, by the way, this one feels the most like a video game. At least this sequence does. You can let me know in the comments down below if you've played the games, if this going through this building was part of a sequence in the video game, because it feels very much like, okay, gotta conquer this level before we move on here. And then they get saved, and I was thinking, oh, who is this person? Is this going to be WLF? Is this going to be a Scar? It's Jesse. Jesse comes out of nowhere, and it turns out that Jesse and Tommy were tracking them here. I suppose that makes sense. It just wasn't even crossing my mind at all that we'd see Jesse and Tommy in this setting and just at any point. So it was a big surprise to me. I suppose, again, it makes sense that they were going to go after them. And And Ellie was like, how'd you find us? And Jesse's like, oh, the map you left. There's some questions that I have about how precisely Jesse knew exactly where they were going to go and how he himself didn't get caught either. But again, I mean, I think that those things will either get explained or it's just not that important to the story. They go into the forest, though, and then the Scars are sacrificing a WLF member, which is horrific. It's terrifying. And then they go and start chasing after Ellie and the crew. Dina gets shot, and so Ellie has to split off from them. And Ellie goes to the hospital, and she finds Nora, who is one of the people who were part of the crew that killed Joel. And man, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to watch because you know how much Ellie wants her revenge. So much so that Nora is able to bait her and distract her, and there's this chase throughout the hospital. And as you realize that she's about to drop into that what do you call it, the basement level, right? As she's about to drop into the basement level, you kind of realize what's going on here, and all those threads start to connect together. Because obviously Ellie, I wondered if Ellie, there was going to be the subplot of maybe Ellie's not immune to the spores themselves, but she's immune to the bites. But it looks like she's immune to the spores as well. The set design is incredible. Just seeing the cordyceps and the fungus all around the basement, it gave me literal body chills seeing that. It was really really big kudos to the set designers here. But Nora's confronting Ellie, or Ellie's confronting Nora, and Nora's telling Ellie, all these things about it. Like, she's revealing. It's supposed to be a big moment, right? A big moment about how Ellie is, didn't know that Joel was the one who killed everyone in the hospital, including Abby's dad. But Ellie says, I know. And so then, jumping ahead a couple minutes, right? We have the flashback at the very end of the episode of Joel coming back. And I wonder if, I'm sure we'll find out this must be where the rift started, where Joel must have told Ellie what was going on. And that's where the rift began between the two of them. Maybe. I'm sure that will make some more sense in the next episode. If she knew. Maybe she was bluffing in the scene. I don't know. So that's one thing that will have to get resolved in the next episode. But the way that she was beating Nora, it's the idea of the cycle of violence, right? It's you think that revenge is going to right the wrong, and in reality, it just continues to perpetuate itself, continues to perpetuate the violence, and it just never stops. And we end on that little flashback of Joel, or whether or not she's waking up from a dream, or I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. By waking up from a dream, I mean, she gets out of there and then she's sleeping or whatever. I don't know what this is, if it's a flashback or something she's thinking about in that moment. I don't know. And we'll have to find out, because that means Pedro Pascal is coming back probably for the majority of episode 6, and then we'll head into episode 7. So I would imagine episode 6 is going to be a big flashback episode, and then episode 7 is going to be a confrontation between Ellie and Abby. Again, I mean, if that's the way that they're planning it, I don't know if that's the way that they're planning it here. I really do feel like, you do see the points in which this first half of the game was stretched out to fit a full season. And honestly, I mean, again, pending how season 2 goes, and pending how season 3 goes, so we're not even going to know about this until season 3 comes out. I feel like stretching it out into 2 seasons was maybe not the best decision. Again, I don't. It's not that I dislike any episode in particular. Episode 4 again was disappointing, but you just kind of feel like it's too stretched out and too shortened all at the same time, and it's kind of hard to decipher that. So we'll see where we go from here. But again, I thought this episode 5 was a really solid return to form for the show. So guys, what did you think of season 2, episode 5 of The Last of Us? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Is this a good episode in your eyes, or perhaps this is still going in the wrong direction? Let me know in the comments down below.